Hi, everybody. I'm going to read Dorothy Gilman's The Unexpected Mrs. Pollifax. Chapter 1. The nurse walked out of the room, closed the door behind her, and Mrs. Pollifax looked at the doctor, and he in turn looked at her. He was a very nice young man, with black hair, very white teeth, and horn-rimmed glasses that he removed now, placing the stem of the... Sorry, my streaming isn't working quite right. Placed the stem of the earpiece between his teeth. "Well, Mrs. Pollifax," he said pleasantly, "I don't know how you can manage it, but for a woman of your age, you're in fantastically good health. I congratulate you." "Oh," said Mrs. Pollifax flatly, and the doctor glanced at her with such a peculiar expression that she added brightly, for his benefit, "Oh!" He smiled and returned his glasses to his nose. "Which brings me to the fact that although I find you in excellent health physically, I do note certain signs of depression. You're not quite the same Mrs. Pollifax I saw last year. Anything in particular troubling you?" She hesitated, wondering if he would possibly understand. He looked so absurdly young. He was young. He added pointedly, "I have the distinct feeling that you are disappointed at being in such excellent health." She said guardedly, "I don't believe I've ever cared about outliving my contemporaries, you know. I've never regarded life as a competition to see who can hold out the longest. I think one can sometimes have too much time." She paused and then added recklessly, "I dare say it sounds terribly frivolous when people are starving in India, but I can't help feeling I've outlived my usefulness." There, she thought firmly, she had said it. In the word, in the air. "I see. Your children, Mrs. Pollifax, are grown and far away, and visits aren't the same. You know, one can never enter their lives." He was listening attentively. Yes, he was a very nice young doctor. "I think you said you do a great deal of volunteer work." In a precise voice she ticked off the list of charities to which she gave her time. It was a long and sensible list. The doctor nodded. "Yes, but do you enjoy volunteer work?" Mrs. Pollifax blinked at the unexpectedness of his question. "That's odd," she said, suddenly smiling at him. "Actually, I suppose I loathe it." He could not help smiling back at her. There was something contagious about her smile, something conspiratorial and twinkling. "Then perhaps it's time you looked for more congenial outlets," he suggested. Mrs. Pollifax said slowly, with a little frown, "I enjoy meeting people. The people, you know. It's just that so often nothing more is needed for volunteer work than a good set of teeth." "I beg your pardon?" "Teeth for smiling. There are rules, too. You can't imagine how regimented some of the volunteer work can be. It's very impersonal, not yours somehow because of all the restriction. Do you feel you're a particularly creative person?" Pax smiled. "Goodness, I don't know. I'm just me." He ignored that, saying very seriously, "It's terribly important for any age to live to his full potential." "Yes," she said simply, "I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, but what is one to do?" "After my husband died, I set out to make a very sensible life for myself, always intending, you see, so that I would never be a nuisance to my children. It's just that it's too sensible, perhaps." Caught by something in her eyes that did not match the light mockery of her voice, he said, "But isn't there something you've always longed to do, something you've never had either the time or the freedom until now?" Mrs. Pollifax looked at him. "When I was growing up, for years I planned to become a spy," she admitted. threw back his head and laughed, and Mrs. Pollifax wondered why, when she was being her most serious, people found her so amusing. She supposed that her tastes always had been somewhat peculiar. Her husband's favourite form of endearment for her had been "love of a little goose," which was his way of forgiving the odd bend in her that he didn't quite understand. And as they grew older, the children too had acquired the habit of thinking her just a little absurd. She could hear Jane now. "But, Mother, why on earth, a dozen times, nobody's used those words since Queen Victoria died." How futile it had seemed even to explain the woman selling crochet work at the door that morning, a dear mangy little woman with more fascinating story of being abandoned 6 years early on Montgovern Street, with no husband and 4 babies to support. She had turned in desperation to the handiwork learned as a child at a convent, and Mrs. Pollifax had listened with rapt attention, enjoying every minute of it. After buying the I'm sorry, my streaming is not working. I may have to turn it off and start again. I know, I was just getting up to go